Charlie's Best.
BCTV, together we'll have the best year yet.
Good morning. The Minister of Human Resources, the Honourable Grace McCarthy, said yesterday that she has no plans to tighten MHR's scrutiny of children in foster homes. I would be inclined to accept that as reasonable in perhaps 90 or 95% of all the children in foster homes. But I think Grace must answer more specifically about the particular case on which we ran a report the other day of a woman, a girl, now a young woman, who got a $30,000 ex gratia payment, you might say, from the Human Resources because of the brutal way she had been handled in a foster home 40 miles down a dirt road the other side of Alexis Creek. Here's what the girl told us.
Why didn't you get out?
Where was I supposed to go? I was 40 miles out in the bush from Alexis Creek, and it was cold, and I didn't know which way to go. I was afraid.
Could you phone? Could you call MHR?
No, we had no phone.
See, one thing I would like to know from Grace McCarthy is how many homes are there in British Columbia which are totally out of touch with the local community? This particular girl, for instance, had to be met 20 miles from the home by the man who later was given 7 years in jail for abusing her one way and another. And while one does not want to dwell on the grossness in this particular case, the fact that MHR had a home 40 miles away in the bush, incapable of checking or supervision, incapable of the youngsters being able to get somewhere nearby to complain, requires assurances from the ministry that we're not sitting on 1, 2, 3, 4, or half a dozen other potential situations. And the whole thrust of my report on that is to draw attention to the fact that while 95% of the foster homes can be left to the parents, there are occasions when particular responses are required from a particular ministry, because behind that case, as I'm sure the report done by the ministry, the Stovall report, will show, something very badly went wrong all the way along the line when it took the girl 7 years to have her complaints listened to and the matter dealt with properly by the authorities. Now, from that particularly serious topic, and I hope to interview Grace on the air about that, I'm going to hold you up a postcard, a nice little postcard. It shows the magnificent structure known as Canada Harbour Place and the Pan Pacific Hotel. This may become very valuable because I have in front of me the letter from the big bullies of Canada Harbour Place to a small publishing company that we want written assurances that you will cease using the intellectual property of Canada Harbour Place and that you will destroy all existing infringements, to wit, the 5,000 postcards. Now, I must compliment the financial expertise of Canada Harbour Place. They want to return every possible nickel to the taxpayer. But I'm tempted to bet you dollars to donuts that the cost of the lawyers and the cost of the trial will be greater than the revenue Canada Harbour Place would receive. And I would suggest that the politicians step in get the big bullies off the backs of the little photographers and let them fire the engines of free enterprise as small businessmen, as I'm sure is the policy, if not of the Liberals, at least of the new Tory government in Ottawa. But what do Canada Harbour Place officials say about this situation? Let's see.
How far is the corporation prepared to go with this?
To the wall.
You're going to go through the courts with it?
Yes, we are. We believe it's an important asset that we have charge of on behalf of all the people of Canada, and we're determined to protect that asset as we've been directed to do by the government.
Aren't you faced then, in that case, with a far greater legal bill than you are from any income you could get from a few postcards?
I don't think so. Most people who have been in this situation with us, most people that have talked to us about potential use have found that we're quite reasonable to deal with. We don't have a huge number of people who are at this point infringing on our trademark, and I don't think we will have. I hope we don't have, but it's an important enough asset, and we have been told by a consultant that the revenue potential from it in the long run is large enough that it's worth it. It's worth our time and effort to fight for it and protect it. And because it's a public asset, we feel that those revenues should come to the federal government, or should come to us as the people.
Canada Harbour Place argues that the taxpayers spent a lot of money putting this building up, and they should get back every dime they can out of any potential revenue in the future. How do you respond to that?
Well, I see the taxpayers benefiting in tourism. If you promote tourism in general, and everyone's seen the beauty of Vancouver through the activities of photographs, they put a restriction on that. They may gain specifically for their income, but all the other potential income is lost. So how do you measure such a thing?
Now, I've been sitting on an interview with Jerry Rubin for a couple of days now, because I'm vaguely self-conscious about it. And if I show it to you this morning, which I probably will, you'll see why I'm self-conscious about it. We had met once 20 years ago, and here's how part of the interview went. All
I know about you is in
It
this,
says
all I know
here-
about you is that in the short discussion you've thrown out more cliches, more prejudice, more. You're not in touch with your own anger, and this is not a discussion. It's throwing words and at each other. It's ridiculous. You're not Phil Donahue.
That is now official. I am not Phil Donahue. For after all, I'm only 5 feet 10 and a half, and I'm 50 pounds heavier than Phil Donahue. Now I'm going to turn to a very serious political matter. And I want you to realize that the Tories have 211 members in the House of Commons. They are secure as a government. Nothing can shift the particular rock of the Tory majority. But not since the Liberal scandals of many years ago, and I don't think it was quite as bad in terms of the House of Commons, have I seen a Prime Minister under such pressure. Now, he hasn't done very well, but just let's try and refresh our memories of some of the crises that have taken place. There was a resignation of Coates, the Defence Minister, after that caper in Europe. There was $2 billion pumped into the banks that were collapsing or near collapsing. And I'll bet you there are major changes in our banking officials in Ottawa in due course because of it. We had the somewhat blatant hypocrisy of the turnaround on patronage by the very man who said he was going to be different. We had the wishy-washy, nice Nelly moves on Arctic sovereignty when the Americans steamed all over us. We had the Prime Minister's statement that the country is broke, which isn't quite accurate. We had the incredible budgetary backdown on the old age pensioner de-indexation. We've had free trade, freer trade, partially free trade, yes, no, maybe, or by your leave, Uncle Sam. We've had the empty jets whistling back and forward as spare planes for our money-conscious Prime Minister. We had, of course, the never-to-be-forgotten affair of the gregarious Hatfield and the temporary demotion of Elmer MacKay. But nothing touches the crisis of anger in the House of Commons. And of course, it was pinpointed yesterday after the Prime Minister had been contradicted not only by his former Fisheries Minister, but by a Tory MP from the very riding in which the star-kissed tuna factory was located. And the point simply was that he had thought he had told the Prime Minister and others in the caucus way back in the summer, and after a phone call from one of Mulroney's caucus liaison officers, that MP, by the name of McCain, changed his memory bank cycle. So off the top this morning, we're going to do an unusual thing. We're going to give you a large part of the very tense and exciting questions in the House of Commons at question period yesterday, after the break. After this segment, I'm going to go to tap your opinions on how things are going. And remember one thing, the big difference, which is preferable between our system and the American system, is that under our question period, the chief executive can be gotten at by his political enemies. Here's the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Prime Minister. I don't want to ask him about tuna. I want to ask him about integrity. Last week, the former Minister of Fisheries told the country that the Prime Minister had received detailed information about the rancid tuna in July. Under pressure, the former minister changed his story and he was fired. This morning, the Member of Parliament for Carleton, Charlotte, the riding in which the tuna factory in St. Andrews, New Brunswick is found, contradicted the Prime Minister by saying that since Parliament has reconvened in September, he has raised the issue repeatedly in caucus before that issue became public. Under pressure from Pat McAdam of the Prime Minister's staff this morning, the honourable member attempted to change his story. I asked the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, what he's been asked before, and I urge him to take it very seriously and to think very carefully before answering. I asked him, would he... Yes? Does the Prime Minister still hold to the position that he never heard of this affair until 1 week ago?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question.
Well, CTV has reported that Ian Anderson, who was then Director of Communications, is now the Deputy Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, received a transcript delivered to him 8 weeks ago with a full account of the story, which has since become public. The Prime Minister's caucus liaison, Patrick McAdam, an old college roommate, an old buddy, also knew of the matter in July. My question to the Prime Minister, is he asking Canadians to believe that the matter was serious enough to cause the resignation of a Minister of the Crown, and yet not serious enough to be told to him by two of his most senior officers in his cabinet office, in his office of the Prime Minister? Is that what he's asking us to believe?
I'm not asking the Leader of the Opposition to believe anything. I was asked a question, and have been for the last 3 days while he was absent from this House, and I told the truth, and that's what it is.
Here,
I have indicated to this House, I need no request for period of reflection. I informed this House, under interrogation by my honourable friend, the leader of the New Democratic Party and others, that this was brought to my attention for the first time on Tuesday night of last week. That is the fact. Anything at variance, any statement at variance with that is false, and I have invited anybody who so contends, from whatever side of the House, to put a seat in play.
Supplementary.
We have a statement of a former minister. We have a statement of a member of parliament. We have admissions that the Minister of National Defense knew, the Minister of Justice knew, the Minister of Health knew. Mr. Speaker, yes. Well, I'm suggesting to the Prime Minister, sir, we're dealing with a very serious issue affecting the integrity of the highest office in the land. That's what we're dealing with. Now, the issue is not fish. We don't have fish before the House anymore. We have the possibility of a cover-up, and I'm saying that is.
I would invite the right honourable gentleman to come to a question, please.
Mr. Speaker, I think Canadians demand to know the truth. And sir, you know that this is a very fragile place, and if the Prime Minister has any respect for this institution, I urge him to come clean with the whole story of when he knew this and what this is about.
Mr. Speaker. The leader of the opposition says that the Minister of Health knew. That is false. He says that the Minister of Defense knew. That is false. He says that the Prime Minister knew. That is false. He says that the Minister of Fisheries knew. He acknowledged that and took his responsibilities in a way that's completely alien to the Liberal Party, who have no respect for the truth or Parliament.
The question to the Prime Minister is, does the challenge to put your seat up apply to the member from Carleton Charlotte? If he's wrong and he didn't inform caucus and you at the same time, and the Prime Minister at the same time, would the Prime Minister have the member from Carleton Charlotte put his seat on the line, or would the Prime Minister quit this charade and tell the truth to the House of Commons?
Good afternoon,
The honourable member, no. Everybody just calm down, please. The honourable member knows there is an implication in the last part of his question which is improper, and I would invite him simply to rephrase only the question without that part.
Mr. Speaker, my second question for the Prime Minister is that does the Prime Minister know the price of defending a lie? That the loss is honor, the loss is the integrity of his government, and does he know that, in fact, that it's a very serious problem?
The honourable member is skating very close, and he knows it. It is not proper. It is order, please, all members. Order, please, all members. What is improper is not made proper by yelling about it. The honourable member is skating very close to a line. I would simply ask him to because he knows it is improper to do indirectly what cannot be done directly. To make an accusation of that sort with regard to character is improper in this House. I therefore invite the honourable member to withdraw the earlier question, to put a simple question of fact, if he has one, please.
Mr. Speaker, the simple question of fact is that a Minister of the Crown has given contradiction.
Order, please. Next questioner. Order, please. Next questioner. One member for come report Port St.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, the issue today before this Parliament is not about tainted tuna, any more than the issue more than a decade ago in the United States was about a bungled break-in at Democratic headquarters. Now, I repeat the question my colleague attempted to put to the Prime Minister. Given the Prime Minister's challenge yesterday that anybody who contradicts his version of truth should put his seat on the line, will the Prime Minister inform this House whether or not the member for Carleton Charlotte has resigned, or how does the Prime Minister explain the statements made this morning by a member of his caucus?
The statement that I made yesterday applies to any member of this House, irrespective of where he sits. I can tell my honourable friend that the member of Parliament to whom he refers has since issued a statement which substantially alters the impact of the first statement. I can tell my honourable friend that he has not been here. He, as I understand it, been ill. Apparently, it's sort of funny for the NDP, but apparently the statement was that this came up in September. The member in question has been ill and has not been in Ottawa since last June.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I have the greatest respect for the member for Carleton Charlotte. I've sat on the Fisheries Committee with him for 4 years. He's a very sharp mind, and he fights hard for his area. I believe he raised the matter in caucus. And I asked the Prime Minister again. How can the Prime Minister square the fact that both the Fisheries Minister and the member for Carleton Charlotte have issued clarifying statements under pressure from his office? Does that not represent a very dangerous and frightening pattern of members being pressured by his office to conform to the Prime Minister's law?
Mr. Speaker, in response, I too have the same kind of respect for the honourable member of Parliament who has been ill, member for Carleton, who's been ill for some time. I haven't followed his movements exactly, but my information is that he has not been in Ottawa hardly at all, if at all, since the month of June. But in any case, let me just say this. Right Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Leader of the New Democratic Party, will, I'm sure, agree with the basic principle that matters that transpire in caucus are, of course, secret. I will, however, without hesitation, make an exception to that rule today and tell you that at no time was that matter raised in my caucus by that member in my presence.
I don't know how long this tension and this issue will last in the House of Commons. It's obviously a matter of the greatest import to those who follow the House of Commons in detail. But what I'm wondering this morning is, does the public really care? Does the public really care about the allegations of the lack of integrity in the House of Commons? Does the public really care about the statements which have been amended here and there? Or would they rather that the MPs got on with the business of trying to run the country? I'm not going to guide your opinions either way on this morning, but I'd like your reaction on the state and the performance of the Conservative government under Mr. Mulroney right now, short, sharp and succinct, after the break. I'm not going to do a poll on how you would vote if an election were held tomorrow, because there ain't going to be no election tomorrow. There ain't going to be an election for a long time to come. But of course in British Columbia we have a specific interest in the fate of John Fraser, the Fisheries Minister, the former Fisheries Minister. Let's see what happens. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I think what happens in the House of Commons is probably what the best feature of our form of government, in that a man has to stand up in front of his peers and defend himself, defend his opinions and his actions. To disregard that and to say let's get on with the business of government is inviting trouble, in that they will carry on in these cover-ups and whatever, and keep it so much in the back rooms that they don't have to defend themselves.
How do you think Mulroney looks in the House yesterday?
I think he's learned a very, very important lesson. Hopefully he's a smart man. Hopefully he'll apply it. I think he's double-crossed us. I think he's tried to appease the financial interests of over the interests of the public at large. I think it's what government does in many cases. I think this is a prime. I'm glad they finally got caught at it. I think this is the method of operation that they tend to do, is to put financial interests ahead of human
principle. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I think that the only real difference between the Liberal and the Conservative right now is that the Liberals have had far more practice in covering up things in the past. I believe that the Conservatives have not been in power too often for the simple fact we have a tendency to tell the truth. And sometimes when you tell the truth, you get caught. Now, I can see a big smile on your face, or I can envision it, but I believe that to be the truth.
In other words, the Conservatives are still amateurs at government and haven't got all the slippery finesse of the Liberal Party, which controlled this country and led perhaps...
Hopefully never will have the slipperiness of the Liberal. And as far as the NDP standing up and ranting and raving, let them rant and rave all they want, sir. They will never form a government. They can say whatever they like. They'll never do it.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
You can't be a winning general every day of the week. That's what Harry Truman says, and that's true.
So he's still your general, even if he's not winning at the moment?
Every general can't do it. They can't be a winning general every day of the week, and so the Conservatives got caught. But I feel that the Conservatives are doing a far better job than the Liberals have.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I go along with the guy that spoke first. You know, except for the back end of his statement. I think that they should just get off their butts and get this country going. And as far as the third or fourth speaker goes, I don't think the United States should come into this thing at all, because we're not Americans, we're Canadians.
Thank you, sir. Just a minute. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning.
Yes, I think the Conservatives so far have done a fairly good job in the House, and obviously as Canadians we respect the House of Parliament. But I do feel that I think a lot of Westerners would agree as well that I think we feel a bit let down out west here. I think after the energy deal that Miss Carney has signed in regards to the purchase of the Gulf Canada stations, and I think this cover-up as well with Mr. Fraser being the senior minister from BC.
The scapegoat.
Yes.
Well, I mind you, some people say he was a scapegoat. I think he must carry a very, very large part. Even if the PMO had handled it differently, Fraser must carry the can, if you'll forgive the pun, for that particular issue.
Exactly.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I believe that the leader of the opposition was entirely right when he mentioned that the House of Commons is a fragile place, and in my opinion, there's no room for doubt.
No room for doubt, or really no room for any doubts about the integrity of the Prime Minister, you'd say?
Right.
Good, I've got to take it away from you because you've got a bad line. Go ahead, please.
Yes, there are two issues here. One is the actual tuna scandal, but the far more important one is of Mr. Mulrooney seen to save his own skin at the expense of those of his cabinet. And that is a very grave matter for all Canadians. He is there for himself, not for the interest of his cabinet or the government at large.
I think that's pushing it a little bit too far. He is there because he is the first Conservative Prime Minister in many years who has a solid majority and can, in effect, take the country in whichever direction he so wishes. People are worried about the fact that, especially right-wing Tories, that he doesn't seem to be going on his philosophical principles enunciated in the campaign. But you do raise the point. The word of politicians, when they make a statement in the House of Commons, must be accepted. But there is a challenge at this moment to the integrity of the Prime Minister, and it's a sharper challenge, as we see from the House of Commons, as we have seen in many a long year. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, I have a suggestion regarding this whole situation. I think that perhaps if a polygraph lie detector test was administered to Brian Mulrooney, I think that that would clear everything up. And I think that...
Well, that's a silly suggestion, as you know.
I think the thing is, I think I can see all kinds of problems with it, but I think that it would cover a very fundamental point. And the thing is, if Brian Mulrooney realized that he may be called to take a polygraph test, then perhaps he would be careful with what he says.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes, my personal opinion is that the MPs don't care either way whether or not Prime Minister knew whether this tuna was tinted or not. My opinion is that they are using this as a weapon to discredit him.
I would be inclined to agree with that somewhat cynical view, that once you've got a man in a shaky position, you hammer and hammer regardless. And it is taken, of course, but that's part of the cut and thrust of the House of Commons. The Prime Minister, and this is what, as I was saying, our system is so much superior to the Americans, and our elected people, if there is a live opposition, have to answer then and there. But I take your point. Thank you, ma'am. And I'll take a break and come back to more of this rather fascinating response from you after the break. We're testing your reaction to the performance, especially the current performance of the Conservative government under Brian Mulroney. Go ahead, please.
Well, Mr. Webster, all I have to say is that Canadians seem to have gotten the government they deserve. One with no sense of direction, one that wants to govern by poll instead of leadership. At least the previous government led, even though we didn't always like the direction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster. I'm very sad when I hear our government talk and scream and yell and behave like very silly, spoiled children in an unorganized classroom. I'm very sad that we as Canadians look at our government to represent us, and when we look at the representation that we are getting, we feel very sad and abused by these people who think that they're controlling messianic delusions of being someone extremely important to represent the people when the people feel left out totally. We don't really care, I don't personally, whether they're right or wrong, as long as they represent the people, the majority of the people, in an honest, respectful, considerate way. And this I don't feel they're doing.
Who do you resent the most?
I beg your pardon, sir?
Who gets most of your resentment? All of the parties or any particular party?
I don't feel that any one party will stand out more than the rest. I feel all three parties do not represent the people properly.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. I agree with the speaker previous to this last one. I believe the Mulroney government is falling apart. Canadians are tired of watching the government falling all over themselves. They're falling apart, and thank goodness the last government we had in, at least they knew how to lead us.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Well, Jack.
Yes.
I think Mulroney's skating on pretty thin ice. I wonder if most Canadians believe that it was ever proved that he lied to the House of Commons, that there'd have to be another election. He'd have to resign, you know. And this is a very serious matter.
But it's a very, very serious matter, politically speaking, and he has made it perfectly clear that he is not going to back down one whit, and anybody who thinks otherwise can bloody well put his seat on the line, including the Tory MP who got caught up in the confusion from the Starkist constituency yesterday.
I think it's awful kind of peacockish of him to have ask the House of Commons to believe the sequence of events that went on, for God's sake.
Good, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm not surprised. As the old saying goes, the politicians, all of them speak with forked tongue, and it's pretty hard to believe. I became very disillusioned when Pearson told me personally that his government was going to stand or fall on whether the flag was going to contain 3 maple leaves or 1 maple leaf, and he said it was going to be 3 maple leaves because that was the one he approved. And I was foolish enough to have manufactured 10,000 flags with the 3 maple leaves. So that's how I believe the governments, all of them, are just foolish as hell.
Let me
can't believe a word they say. You've got to be a bigger fool than them to do it.
Let me get this. Let me understand you clearly. You asked Pearson how many maple leaves were going to go on the flag because you were in the flag-making business.
Right.
And he said 3 maple leaves, so you made 10,000 flags with 3 maple leaves, which you had to throw in the garbage.
That's right, because I believe the politicians.
Go ahead. I wonder if that's true. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack, all it would take in this case is one small piece of paper proving that Mulroney actually knew. And if that could be produced, he would have to resign. And I'd just like to say as well that Mr. Mulroney couldn't carry Mr. Trudeau's briefcase.
Thank you. Go ahead from Kamloops.
Morning, Jack.
Morning.
I think what you should do is give them each a can of tuna and see who eats it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's not a laughing matter. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Jack.
Morning.
Jack, I listen to the House of Commons, and I'm getting tired of just the kindergarten-like sense of humor that they have. I understand that it takes about 4 years to change a government and change some of the things that go on in Canada. I feel that the Liberals made a big mistake by not bringing Chrétien into leading the government, because I feel that if Chrétien had been the leader, he would be Prime Minister right now.
Well, you're only crying spilt milk after supping up spilt milk after the fact. The fact is that Chrétien is not the leader. Much to some people's surprise, Turner is appearing sharper and more brutal and more aggressive in the House of Commons, and probably is cementing his feet into position to be the leader in the next election.
Well, I hope so. But I tell you, with the promises that Mulroney gave, not all of them are coming out, and I think he should step down.
Thank you. Hardly a practical proposition. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Webster. Love your show today. It's great. First a statement, then a question.
Right.
It's too bad these people think our governments are childish, etc., in the House of Commons, because that's what all debating societies are. Okay, now a question. In the caucus Mulroney's talking about, that he says the tuna affair was never brought up, do they keep meetings of such meetings?
I don't know. A caucus meetings, as the Prime Minister said, are secret, although on this occasion he was quite willing to state publicly that it was not raised when he was in the caucus. There is confusion about that particular time, at least in my mind, whether it was June or July, certainly by September. But the fact remains is this man, we're told by the Prime Minister, was sick from June. I don't think that really matters nowadays in this particular situation. As you and I both know, when the Prime Minister says that is false, that is false. And to have it proven to the contrary would be most unusual and unexpected and unlikely.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Apart from the very integrity of the Prime Minister himself, of course. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
I can't seem to find anybody that voted for Mulroney now anywhere.
Well, that was the same with the Liberals, but no, I can find many Tories who voted for Mulroney. Many people who voted for Mulroney. I don't think the vast ground support has by any manner of means disappeared. Even in Western Canada, where we're now down to 2 cabinet ministers and may not get a 3rd major cabinet post.
Do you think now that Charlie the Tuna's out of work, maybe Mulroney will give him a job? He'd make a good Minister of Fisheries there.
Charlie the Tuna, a good suggestion. One more short segment of phone calls after the break. From Prince George, go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning, ma'am.
I believe in the saying innocent till proven guilty. And if they are covering up, it's no big deal, as if the opposition never has. I think they should just get on with business. I think unemployment and the economy I believe to be more important. Let's just get on with it.
I think this debate will probably have come to an end very shortly indeed. I think so. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to know who's running the country around here nowadays. It's just getting to the point where, it's just totally ridiculous, and it's really got nothing to do with the price of fish anymore,
No. You want to see an end to this attack on the Prime Minister and his integrity and command of business. Whatever happened to that, it happened. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Webster,
Yes, sir.
fantastic show. You know what? It always amazes me how many people are so upset. They vote the government in. They have these guys who can set their wages the way they want. They get the long holidays. I mean, how much do these guys make a year? And so we pay these guys those wages, and they're sitting down there saying, well, we don't want to talk about unemployment. We don't want to talk about the price of gas because we bought you a gas company and everything. What we want to argue about is Well, this tuna that was on the racks, it's been off the racks back in the warehouse. The situation is cleaned up and taken care of. Instead of running the government, they go, well, let's argue about whether you knew about the tuna or not. I mean, these guys are ridiculous. And what's more ridiculous is we, the people, put these people into those jobs. I mean, if you ever saw a student council acting like they did, banging on desks, the moderator would put an end to it right now.
Thank you, sir. I wonder how many people he represents, really. Quite a lot, perhaps. Go ahead, please. Hello, oh no, wrong one, my mistake. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster?
Yes, sir.
I would like to disagree with you on your earlier statement about the fact that we have a superior system to the states. The thing which brought the Nixon government down was the fact that two independent bodies, the Senate and the Congress, at that time happened to be dominated by the opposition, the Democrats. And they were able to hold free hearings and eventually get at the truth. I don't believe that can happen under our system.
Very good point. The point I was making, and I think the American system of checks and balances has got many built-in protections which we lack. As you may have heard me say before, Prime Minister of just a minute, don't go away. The Prime Minister of our type of government can become, with a majority, an absolute, total dictator. He can make you pregnant. The only thing he can't make you is love the child. And that's the danger of the British parliamentary system, which was originally involved on two intelligent bodies of people opposing each other with common sense and coming to a consensus. Now, of course, it's a steamroller. The big mistake is in the leadership conventions which pick the leaders outside of the House of Commons. I'd much rather see the situation whereby those elected to the House of Commons pick the leader instead of, as I say, with great acerbity and racism and sexism, but using it as a political phrase, instead of a bunch of little old ladies in running shoes whose fares are paid to Ottawa. That's what I object to in our system. And nothing will make me change my opinion. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Webster.
Morning.
As far as I'm concerned about this tuna fish, right from the beginning, I can say honestly, or probably many Canadians will think, this Prime Minister telling a slightly lie.
You mean not quite telling the truth, I'd rather you say.
100%. And far as I think the other way around, when Richard Nixon's affair goes about Watergate, he never gave up until this very last minute. So this Prime Minister is not a good leader the way we vote for him, and he have a majority vote as highest in Canada for so many years, but he's not telling the truth. He's so many lies.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Could you tell me why we have a prime minister? Because whatever it was Trudeau or Norman Mulroney, they don't even know what's going on in their own cabinet.
Well, that would appear to be the case at this particular moment, when all the assistants and other ministers knew about the whole thing, but Mr. Mulroney didn't know about it until the television program on the Tuesday night.
Yeah, but if he's the boss of his own ministry.
Somebody thought it wasn't important enough to take the Prime Minister. Somebody thought it had been satisfactorily cleared away. But when it came out on the television program, it was game over for John Fraser about that. There was no doubt whatsoever. Thank you for your cooperation on this morning. We're going to talk to a fellow by the name of Latchkey Parks, a mystery guest, after the break. John Parks is a social credit MLA for Millardville, Coquitlam. His community has a growing problem with a growing number of latchkey children. You know, the kids that have nobody at home when they after school and carry their keys kind of deal. Well, intrigued by this, I sent reporter Mark Schneider out to give us the flavor.
Jack, with now over half of all women in BC's workforce, it's a sure thing that many of their children will be coming home from school to an empty house. They're called latchkey children, and it's estimated that BC now has 62,000 of them. 62,000 children up to the age of 12 who come home by themselves from school, let themselves in, and wait for mommy and daddy to come home. When you talk to the latchkey kids, these are the sort of things that they say. What do you do when your mom and dad aren't home?
I just go home and watch TV.
How do you get in?
By my key.
Let's see it. and you go home, you let yourself in, and you wait for your mom and dad to come home.
Yes, sir.
Don't you feel lonely when you...
Not really, because we have chores to do, or we watch TV, or something like that, or do our homework.
Well, who's home now?
No one.
How are you going to get in?
I got a key for my house.
Oh, can I see it?
Well, it's in a hidden spot.
Oh, you hide your key. What about you?
I go home after school, and my mom always locks the door, or else sometimes she's not home, and my key's up in my classroom.
Tell me, how many of you kids have keys to get into your house? Let's see. How many of you kids have keys? Show me your keys that you've got.
I leave them at home. Yeah.
How many of you kids will go home and mommy and daddy won't be there? You have to wait for them to get home. All of you with your hands up? Where's your mommy? What's she doing?
She's working.
What about yours?
She's working.
And yours? Your mom works too?
Yeah. She works.
Well,
my mom works.
That must feel kind of weird to come home and nobody be there.
No, not really. Because we're usually all alone before, because my mom and my dad both work. Well, so I'm used to it.
When you start looking, the keys are everywhere. The children do get used to being by themselves, but there are dangers, crises the kids just can't cope with. Has anything bad happened to you while she's been away?
No.
Ever gotten afraid?
Well, just once, a few months ago.
What happened?
Because the lady that lives beside us, she drinks and stuff, so she went into our house one day and just started pushing around my brother and stuff, and we had to phone the police.
That's bad. Some kids go to organized after-school care programs, but these can be expensive, costing up to $150 per month. An alternative is being promoted by SOCRED MLA John Parks, who would like to organize thousands of adult volunteers to monitor the latchkey kids by phone and give them basic training in urban survival skills. It's an idea opposed by daycare advocates.
That is a very dangerous kind of program for full-time alternate childcare. It is unacceptable as a full-time alternate.
Why? What's your problem with it?
It creates a sense of security that is not there. These children need adult supervision. They need licensed quality programs.
Yeah, but if I understand right, there will be some kind of a phone buddy that the kid can call in case that he gets in trouble.
But that does not provide the child with the kind of ongoing social interaction that they need, the kind of development of their self-concept.
That's all real expensive stuff you're talking about.
I know, and we're looking for government and corporate sponsorship of these kinds of programs to make them affordable and accessible to young children.
Now, that woman very sharply knocks down John Parks' latchkey program. John, what's your program?
Well, my program basically is an attempt on my part after recognizing this problem. And first, let me commend Mark Schneider's footage there, because it in a few seconds, beautifully capsules the problem. And having become aware of it the last few months, I asked my research assistants to do some research with respect to numbers, because it became evident to me that we had a growing number of latchkey children. They came up with some pretty alarming figures. Something like at least 1 in 5 of every family in my area is a latchkey family, and that's a regular latchkey family. In other words, basically Monday to Friday, the child goes home to an empty home every day. But in addition to that, of course, you've got the instances where very frequently throughout the school year, a parent is not going to be home when he or she expects, and the child ends up going home unexpectedly.
Oh, that's quite routine, of course.
It's very routine. So in that sense, there are latchkey children throughout the community. In fact, probably are all latchkey children. My idea is to bring together the existing community resources in our area and have them meet this need. So what I've done is I've approached some 100-plus organizations in Coquitlam, and they have very favorably responded to it and have indicated a willingness to work towards assisting the children in this situation. The idea is that it is not going to be a government-funded program, and it's not going to be at a cost to the consumer.
Give me in 30 seconds or less how it's going to work. Volunteers taking kids home or something?
No, well, it's going to work in two phases at this moment. First of all, we're going to have a registration process where every school child in Coquitlam will be fingerprinted and photo ID'd. That information will go home to the family, in addition to a number of educational printed material, coloring books for the young kids, how to street-proof yourselves, tips on how to react to molesters or abusers or whatever, as well as there's going to be a phone a friend set up whereby these children, if they are home alone and there is a suspicious noise or the toilet overflows or whatever should occur, they know that if they dial, in this case 937 kids, someone's going to be there to assist them, be it on who to call or what to do.
Have you got 937 kids?
Yes, I've got 937 kids.
More with John, and your calls on his plan. You might want to ask him some details. With time for one segment on John's Latchkey Kids program after the break. You've got... John Parks, MLA for Millardville, Coquitlam. You say you've got 937 kids.
Reserved.
Telephone number reserved already for the program.
Not operational at this very moment. It won't be for probably 2 or 3 weeks.
You've got 100 organizations.
That's correct.
Are you going to use volunteers at a kind of central place?
Well, we're very fortunate in Coquitlam because we have some excellent volunteer organizations. And I guess one of the main umbrella organizational groups is called SHARE. And they have agreed this past, I believe it was Tuesday evening, at their last board meeting, to in effect man the telephone system and supervise the training and the screening of volunteers.
And every child would get a self-help kit. Every family with a latchkey child would get your self-help kit.
I would like it to go to every child in the school district.
Who's going to pay for it?
Well, that's at the moment the only hurdle I've come up against, and that is I'm going to good corporate citizens in the community, asking them to get involved with a program where we do have the community volunteering their services, and we feel the corporations should assist, and I'm being very well received in that.
Go ahead to John Parks.
Yeah, thanks. Don't you think that fingerprinting children is a little bit over and above? I mean, that should be the parents' responsibility, don't you think?
I think the whole concept of this program, I don't want it to be misconstrued that I condone leaving children home alone or that I think that the state or individual volunteer associations should do the parents' responsibility. However, having said that, I have recognized a fact, and that fact is that there are children in my community, I think throughout BC, who do need a little bit of assistance. Families need a bit of assistance in this regard. The police are extremely supportive.
Fingerprinting.
The police are extremely supportive of the fingerprinting concept. And why they are so supportive of this concept is unlike the very good programs that some community groups have taken on throughout the community. This program will be fingerprinting hopefully every child in the school district. So it's not hit or miss.
I mean, I just say to you, one doesn't like them on principle. It's got a kind of sinister connotation.
Stressing, of course, that fingerprint information, photo ID, immediately goes home with the child to the parents. So it's for the parents' control solely. We will not have any of that information.
Good point. Go ahead, please.
Hi, yes, Mr. Parks. It's kind of refreshing to see somebody out there for a change that is finally trying to do something, and looking out for the kids instead of complaining about them all the time. I have a 12-year-old myself, and all I have to say is keep up the good work, sir.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Parks.
Morning.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you're bringing up the issue about the latchkey kids and everything. Like, I deal with a lot of kids every day in that regards. And one thing here, like you're saying about fingerprinting the kids and, getting all that information out of the kids and all about the kids. And the real issue here, I mean, is about, like, the kids carrying the actual key. I mean, a show like this, you're telling every kid now that wears a key. You're telling all these molesters and everybody out there that these kids are wearing the keys.
I understand your concern, sir, but that's part of the process. That's an integrated program with respect to our block parents, which you must be familiar with. That hopefully ensures the route to and from school is relatively safe. We have an extremely active block parent program in Coquitlam, very successful. We tie in making the families as well as the children aware of these various resources in our community. The main thrust of my program is to increase the community awareness of what is available. Because until I started looking, I was not even the least bit aware of how many resources we do have in the community.
Go ahead, please.
Hey, Jack.
Yes.
Good morning. I hope you won't cut me off so soon.
No.
I phoned a while ago, but regarding this latchkey thing, I think these kids should have someone to come home to. You know,
You got to face
just
the
don't
facts of
believe
life.
Coming home to an empty home. I'm a 55-year-old man, and I was well. I mean, I was screwed up right from the beginning because my parents were both alcoholics, and I was sort of left in the lurch. You know, I mean.
I know, I can understand it, and I can sympathize with you, sir, but I hardly think that you're...
Pardon me?
The facts of life would require one or two parents in many families to be out at work so they can
I know that
eat.
in today's society, both parents have to work in order to make ends
Okay,
meet.
boy, much obliged. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Parks, one easy question. I totally for your system. However, one thing should be brought up. The bond relationship that's grown between the parent and child is so great usually that if anything did go wrong at home, they would phone the parent first. And I've seen this a lot of times with a lot of my friends when they were growing up, before they'd phone 937 kids. How do you stop this?
If they're able to get a hold of a parent, that's fine. I'm not in the least bit interested
Parents first,
in getting in
937.
between that.
Parents first.
Of course.
More with John Parks. Quite a bright idea. He's brighter than I remembered him. After the break. John Parks, latchkey children, and a flood of calls. May not have time for Jerry Rubin today. Go ahead, please. Oh, no, wrong one. I'm not paying attention this morning. Somebody tell me off.
Hello.
Go ahead, please. Oh, no, just a minute.
Oh, jeez.
I've got you right. Go ahead.
Okay.
Good morning.
Two things I'd like to say. First off, that I think he's doing a fabulous job. Something should be done. Somebody said that earlier.
Thank you.
And secondly, being a working parent, my wife and I both work, and we always seem to find the extra $100 or $150 because we both work to put our kids to if we're both working. And I think it's disgraceful that ratio of kids should be out wandering around on the streets. I don't agree with it at all. I don't know what can be done about it, but I really don't agree with it.
What's the extra $150 for? Babysitter?
Yeah.
Penny drops.
Well, I mean, if you're both working, you should be able to afford it, right? Isn't that the idea?
That is the idea.
Unfortunately today, though, with the economy being what it is, so often both parents have to work just to make ends meet, and they don't have that extra revenue for the paid daycare.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, I live in an area where there's a great concentration of latchkey kids, and it's not just the immediate dangers that they're facing when they come home from school. I think to educate these kids about what to do with certain emergencies is adding on to them the anxiety of being alone. And right now they're probably surviving because innocence is bliss. The real problem we're going to find is when these kids are teenagers and what's happening to them. They go outside and they form into gangs because there's no adult supervision. And the real problems are not just the immediate danger that they're facing now as children being alone, but also when they're going to be teenagers and older with no adult supervision, no values, no self-esteem. I mean, this is the crisis. And I think that to have this, what you're proposing is just to put a Band-Aid on a very serious, serious problem, and that there should be more government money lent out to daycare systems or whatever, because this is a problem that we're going to really, really, really pay for.
I totally appreciate your comments, and I make two observations, I guess, in response. Firstly, the initial step is to send home educational material that hopefully the family will work together with. And I mean, this is material supplied, arranged from the fire department, police department, to child psychologists, to existing programs in the States. So there's hopefully some educational value with respect on how to street-proof your children, giving them some basics in first aid and house safety rules, that type of thing.
That's increasing their anxiety level, too.
Well, I would suggest that if we teach them how to handle those types of things and say, look, if anything does arise, here's how you handle it, that's not anxiety. Point two, if I may, on
they
this
have to worry about these things happening.
Well, I would think that ignorance is bliss is very fine unless it's your child that has an incident occur to. And if it's your child that has an incident occur to, and he or she has not been educated and has not been trained on how to handle the situation,
well, I have
then
a
you are going to...
7-year-old little boy who is already worried about nuclear war. I don't want to start having him to be anxious about what would happen if the toilet overflowed, or what would happen if the neighbor across the street came in and started beating on him.
Well, true enough. Surely your ultimate goal, if your government had any money, which it obviously hasn't got, the ultimate goal has got to be after daycare adult supervision.
That's right.
If the problem is as expansive as it appears to be, that is certainly a potential logical conclusion to this program.
There'd be no point in asking for money from your government at this moment.
Well, at this moment, nor have we had a proven need. Now, the first two phases I advised you of, there's a third phase, and that's what we're probably calling the ideal phenomenon. I'm calling that adopt a school, where certain corporate sponsors are actually choosing a school in the community which will act as the resource center after school, and the children will be able to attend that facility for both recreational and craft skills.
Have you got any yet?
We've got two.
Got two.
And I've only been working on that for the last week. It's the latest idea part of this.
Well, Jerry Rubin's going to stay on the shelf today. There is such a response to this program. Many segments have got to go. One long segment after the break. With you, John Parks.
My pleasure.
In the same area, same field.
Men and women who are retired.
We'll make you the 18 to 49 mag.
You know, retired people who say, well, right, I
could always
go
flash
down to
for
that
us.
facility or something, and be kind of a guardian or something or other. Grandfathers and grandmothers.
Well, the old age pension groups
Yeah.
have said we'd love to come down.
That's right.
My only fear is that we make sure that they
I
have
remember
some
once
training.
getting the Santa Claus at Eaton's, who lived in Coquitlam.
You're going to be...
No, he didn't. Fired, because when I saw him in the store, I recognized him. This is John Park's program to give aid and comfort to latchkey children and latchkey parents. One view says it should be proper after-school daycare. Obviously, we ain't going to get that just now. The percentage of latchkey children is horrifying. You say one family in 5?
Minimum.
60-odd thousand latchkey children in British Columbia?
In the province, yes.
I would suspect the figure would be more than that out of our total school population.
Oh, I think, sorry, that's just 6 to 12.
That's
just elementary school.
That's just 6 to 12, is it? So it's not the full lot. More questions. What about volunteers? Do you say you've got hordes of volunteers, potentially?
We have almost a limitless supply of volunteers from the various organizations in Coquitlam.
What about screening the volunteers? Have you some
Well,
of the foster parent things that I've come
yes.
across lately?
A very legitimate concern. In fact, that was the first negative consideration I came up with, and I spoke to the RCMP. They have, as I said earlier, very overwhelmingly endorsed the program and have agreed to screen all of our volunteers at no cost to the program. So,
Voluntary screening for volunteers and done at no cost.
and
by the
training for
RCMP.
whatever aspect we
Very
need.
good. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi.
Morning.
I was a latchkey child, I guess you could say, myself about 10 years ago. And I was sort of left on my own all the time. And I wish they had this program sort of deal going back when I was a child, because I was, the neighbor would come over and, be my friend and stuff, and guys started abusing me, and I think that's probably the reason I'm a homosexual.
Oh dear, I'm sorry, Tim.
Well, that's very sad, and unfortunately, that's what can happen in our society if we don't take some precautionary measures. I should note, 30 or so years ago, I was a latchkey child too, and I identified with that first lad that was interviewed on your
program
initial part, and the fellow who had the key, but he was going home to do chores.
Yeah.
Just because one's a latchkey child does not necessarily mean it's going to be a negative experience. It may well be a positive experience to have that independence. However, there are clearly very negative consequences, and you've just related a very negative one.
Can I make one more comment, if you don't mind?
Of course.
This thing, with human resources and stuff, and they're just not doing what they should this Mr. Parks has a really good idea behind him, and I think Gracie should go out and change her undies.
I don't know.
Let me assure you, sir, that Mrs. McCarthy is doing all that she possibly can. It's a very, very difficult area, and no one person certainly has all the answers.
Thanks very much. I hope to have Gracie, as we call her, on the program. You can't supervise every foster home, but you can make sure there are no more homes 40 miles out in the bush. But I can't involve you in that. That wouldn't be fair. And I'm occasionally fair. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Parks, I'd like to commend you very much in your efforts in this. I haven't wasted my vote in Coquitlam, and Mr. Webster, too, for bringing this out. My daughter is a latchkey child, and I felt it my responsibility when we knew that she would be a latchkey child to educate ourselves as well as educating her.
Very much so.
The Coquitlam Public Library has several books. One in particular, A Parent's Guide to Street-Proofing Children, deals with latchkey children, with the problems to work and back. There are a lot of books like this, and I feel it's up to the parents themselves to educate themselves and to work with the children in this.
Definitely. But that's the type of material that we want to put in the initial package that will be going home to the families. Coquitlam Library, I should note, have been very helpful. They've agreed to make available the Dial a Story, which will tie into our phone-a-friend concept, so that if a child's just bored and wants to have a story read to he or she, they can just phone up that service.
Can you do that now?
You can do that now at the Coquitlam Library, yes.
Good.
But not under my telephone number.
Oh, I see what you mean. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I would like to comment to the lady who thought that ignorance was bliss again. It's wrong. I was a latchkey kid, also abused by a neighbor. But I'd also like to point out that if people were more educated about how to handle their finances, probably we wouldn't need so many mothers in the family working, and we wouldn't have so many latchkey kids.
Well, maybe, ma'am. Thank you.
That's a tough one, ma'am.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Parks, I
morning.
wonder if you thought of the alternative of keeping one parent at home with incentives, such as giving industry incentives to increase the availability of part-time work and work-sharing positions, tax breaks or whatever for the spouse or whatever else you could think of.
I quite frankly have not addressed the problem in that manner, but as I said at the outset, the purpose of my program is to increase public awareness of the problem and what alternatives we have. You are bringing up alternatives that I haven't thought about, and I will. Thank you.
Work sharing is going to be a thing of the future, I'll tell you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I'm a blind person, and I'm going to be traveling to college in Vancouver, and I was watching Good Company a couple of weeks ago on an American channel, and they have what's called an ICANN safety plan, which I'm going to write and send to get the material. And what it's for is for kids at home, for people traveling to and from school, work, or college. And what they've advertised is that people have saved themselves from molesters and abductors with that program. Would John Parks be interested in it if I write and get the material?
I certainly would be. My constituency office in Coquitlam is 1108 Austin Avenue, and please send it along.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Mr. Parks.
Good morning.
I think it's a great idea, but I think the only way that we're really going to be able to provide safe care for our kids is to have more provincial funding for after-school daycare. That's it.
Well, that may be the ultimate conclusion of this exercise in informing ourselves. I at the moment would prefer to see what I believe is going to evolve, and that is the community, including the corporate community, working together and providing a first-class, well-trained, well-supervised, adult-supervised program.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Good morning.
I'd like to bring a comment that was brought up by an earlier caller. And the thing is that one of the paramount things we have to think about is whether or not some of these kids are going home alone. And I think that if we can make sure that they're not going to go alone, if they're going to go home in groups as friends to each other's houses, that might help. And the other thing, where I come from, there was lots of kids, and I think youth clubs were very paramount in them days. Today we don't see that kind of thing around here, and that's just my comment.
Thank you very much, sir.
Well, I know when I was growing up, we had a community center in Vancouver that I spent much of my time at. We don't have those facilities, at least as extensive in the suburbs as we did in Vancouver. So that's another resource that's necessary.
Go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, following on that comment, really, I was just going to suggest to Mr. Parks that a lot of the problems we have been nicely addressed in various community schools in the province, and I think it would be helpful. It would cover the whole range of school-age children, including teens, to have more of the community schools able to be developed by the various school boards, and perhaps his government could aid and assist that instead of not aiding and assisting that.
Well, I'm not that familiar, quite honestly, with respect to the extent of how the community school would assist. And if you have any information on that, I'd be pleased to read it if you'd forward it to me.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm afraid that Mr. Park's good intentions are misdirected. His is a stopgap measure at best and is simply not acceptable. These kids should be accommodated in out-of-school programs, and MHR should subsidize parents who can't afford $100 or $110 a month for their child safely and their own peace of mind.
Well, I appreciate the viewpoint, sir, but I'm of the opinion that I don't want to see any more government programs. I do not want to see our government involved in our lives any more than it is. I feel it's too involved already, and I see absolutely nothing wrong with the community taking care of itself, having some pride in its community, having some eagerness to assist our neighbor or our friend, and I'm sorry, as long as the program's doing the job adequately or well, then what's wrong with the community doing it?
From Victoria.
I don't think it will do the job adequately, and I think it'll take some kind of tragedy to happen where your program doesn't help.
No, hopefully not.
I trust you.
I'm sorry. Briefly from Victoria, do you like the program or not?
Yes, it sounds like a darn good idea, actually.
Hopefully we'll get it to Victoria too, sir.
Thank you very much. When do you hope to have the program in operation, John?
Well, at the moment, and actually as we are talking, a couple of my volunteers are discussing the issue with the BC police chiefs. And
can anybody yet phone 937 Kids?
No. But
tell me when they can, and people can phone you for information about the program. On that number? No.
I'm sorry. I missed your question.
I confused it. My thanks to John Parks, Millardville, Coquitlam. I'll be back after the break.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We're going to take a hard look at the economy tomorrow with one of the leading economists in the nation, Richard Lipsey of the C.D. Howe Institute. But we'll have something bright as well, I trust. So get cracking, Wyatt Schneider. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. precisely. Richard Lipsey, one of Canada's top economists, at 9 a.m. precisely.